know you must know Eddie Arusa
Oh,
quite
yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
Because I know he's done videos on this
Yeah.
project.
With some of the presentations we've done, he has shown his video, although today I just wanted to speak on
Yes.
his slideshow.
His work is just beautiful.
He really did a beautiful job.
Yes. I worked with him years ago working with the channel.
Yeah.
Nice to see these. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more.
All right, welcome everyone. We're good to go. Okay. We are here at the Ethical Humanist Society. My name is Rachel Savage, and I will be moderating today. We have an opening reading by Cheryl Greiner, so if she wants to come up.
Good morning. The quote that I picked is from Lloyd Moraine, he was a two-term president for the EHS, American Humanist Association, and this is his quote. Humanism teaches us to look for courage, for comfort, to one another, our fellow humans. A humanist is like the soldier who feels an exhilarating interdependence with his comrades when faced with common danger. We all have experienced the pleasantness of a sense of closeness with a group of strangers when we've suffered some minor mishap together. For instance, the breakdown of a subway train between stops. Why cannot this satisfying sense of solidarity be called up in all of us by the realization that humankind can expect no special dispensation from the verse? Is it not stimulating and comforting to acknowledge our dependence on one another? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Our program today is part of a wide variety of topics that we talk about at EHS. We talk about current events, philosophy, arts, and sciences, just to name a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing programming related to the arts. So, this morning we welcome Robert Loerzel. He's the author of the Uptown, Chicago's Endangered Movie Palace. Mr. Loerzel is a Chicago-based freelance journalist, author, and photographer with decades of experience covering the city's history, culture, and media. He's the author of Alchemy of Bones, Chicago's Lutgert murder case of 1897, and Walking Chicago, and his work has appeared in major publications including the Chicago Tribune, Chicago Reader, Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Magazine, and the Huffington Post. Mr. Loerzel has also contributed to Chicago Public Radio and co-written multiple Emmy Award-winning documentaries for WTTW's Chicago Stories series. With more than 30 journalism awards and deep roots in Chicago storytelling, Robert Loerzel continues to explore and document the city's past and present. Welcome.
And if we could get my computer's slideshow on the screen. Okay, there we go. Thanks for having me. Now, I've lived in Chicago's Uptown neighborhood for the past 20 years. So I've walked past this giant building, the Uptown Theatre, countless times. And many times I wondered what it looked like inside. It's been closed to the public for 4 decades. This is basically a massive mystery sitting in the middle of the neighborhood. This is what you will see. The building is on the corner there, and the Uptown Theatre is basically on the west side of the building and the north side. You can see it there forming a sort of L shape that wraps around the Green Mill building. Now, working on this book, I finally got a chance to step inside the Uptown Theatre. David Sifchak, who's been working as the building's caretaker for the past 30 years, agreed to give me a tour. If you're lucky enough to get one of these rare tours, one of the first things you'll see as you walk in from Broadway is this room. It's called the Grand Lobby. And this photo by Carrie Primo is on the cover of our book. It was taken several years ago, but it's basically what it looks like today if you get a chance to step inside. And I was stunned that this building is still really in very good shape, and it still has a lot of that magnificence from when it opened 100 years ago. But obviously, it does need refurbishing and repairs if it's ever going to open again. I co-wrote this book with James Andy Pierce, and we had it published last August because that was the 100th anniversary of when this building opened. So when I give my talk here today, a lot of this is based on my own writing, but I also have to give Andy some credit for the work he did on the book. To understand the architecture of the building, let's take a look at what was going on in the surrounding neighborhood. And here's another picture. This is a recent aerial view. The Cook County, every year, the county government posts these aerial photos of the whole county. And if you zoom in here, you can again see that sort of L shape. There's the building there over on the shorter building that you can see on the right side is the Green Mill building, and the Uptown Theatre forms that L around it. But if you were at the corner of Broadway and Lawrence back in 1914, which is 11 years before the theater opened, and you were looking the same angle that we showed earlier, this is what you would have seen. Green Mill Gardens was a much bigger complex than the Green Mill Jazz Club that people know today. It filled basically almost an entire block, stretching all the way back to the next street with this outdoor beer garden. And Green Mill Gardens was part of a movement at that time. They had a lot of outdoor venues, and in things that were French were very popular at the time. So the name Green Mill Gardens is a takeoff on the Moulin Rouge in France. Moulin Rouge is French for red mill. For some reason, when they opened the Chicago counterpart of it, they chose to call it green instead of red. The Moulin Rouge had a windmill on its roof there, and you can see here from this picture of the Green Mill Gardens that it also had a windmill which spun around and lit up there at the corner of the top of the building. And people started to call this neighborhood Little Paris because it had so many French-related things, and it was kind of a nightlife spot where people would go to have fun, just like they might in the Montmartre neighborhood of Paris. The owner of the Green Mill was Tom Chamalis, and he sort of decided to expand his entertainment empire by building a building across the street. And originally, this is what it was going to look like. It was going to be a 10-story hotel and theater. The plans ended up getting scaled down. This became what we know now as the Riviera Theater, or a lot of people call it the Riv. It's not 10 stories tall, though. To build this structure, Tom Chamalis hired the architects Rapp and Rapp. They were two brothers from Carbondale, George Rapp and Cornelius Rapp. They had a philosophy of building theaters that made you feel like you were stepping into a European castle when you came off of the street. Cornelius found some of his inspiration when he took a trip to Europe with his wife, their honeymoon essentially, but it lasted for months. So they were coming back. They originally were going to come back on the Titanic. They booked tickets for it, but then decided to stay in Europe a little bit longer to see more of the architecture, and they probably made a wise decision in not sailing on the Titanic. And when he came back, he had a trunk filled with books with pictures of buildings, like this one, which was Charles Garnier's Opera House in Paris. This was an example of the architecture that inspired the theaters he was designing in places like Chicago. And he also had a book of these drawings of Rome, ancient Rome. You can see here, it's a very elaborate sort of architecture with lots of details. So when they were designing theaters, like the Ringling Theater in Wisconsin, the Al Ringling Theater, they took that inspiration here. So when they started building this theater in Uptown, here's some plans, which I took a picture of at the Chicago History Museum. This is what became the Riviera. But before the theater opened, Tom Chamalis decided that instead of running the theater, he would lease it to someone else to run the company. That was Balaban and Katz, which was a chain of movie theaters run by two Jewish families from the west side of Chicago. They started with small Nickelodeons, and they were working with the same architects, Rapp and Rapp, as they built bigger and bigger theaters. So in 1917, they opened the Central Park Theater on the west side of Chicago. It's on West Roosevelt Road. And then they finished up work on the Riviera Theater and opened that in 1918. Their theaters just kept getting bigger and bigger, so they opened the Tivoli Theater on the south side at Cottage Grove and 63rd Street. Now, these were some of the first theaters in the world that had air conditioning. That was a major selling point to get people to come into the theaters. No one had AC in their homes at that time. So here in these ads here, you can see how they put snow on the letters of the theater, where it says Tivoli and Riviera. And the Riviera ad says 200,000 Chicagoans kept cool in Balaban and Katz theaters last week. They were building theaters in a sort of ring around the downtown Chicago. This is a map from the Encyclopedia of Chicago, which shows where all the movie theaters were in Chicago in 1926. And you can just see from how many dots there are across the city that there were a ton of movie theaters. And if we zoom in for a close-up of the north side, you can see there's a big cluster downtown, but there's also a smaller cluster, pretty big though, forming up around Broadway and Lawrence. Balaban and Katz finally opened a theater in the Loop when they opened the Chicago Theater later in 1921. This is one of the most famous ones that they ever built, and it's still there today. If you look at the building, it doesn't have Model Ts sitting in front of it anymore, but it still looks pretty much like that. But now they've turned their attention back to the Uptown neighborhood. Even though they already were running the Riviera Theater, they decided they wanted an even bigger theater in Uptown. So the Chicago Tribune ran this headline, "Gigantic Movie to Take Place of Green Mill." That wasn't exactly correct. It wasn't going to replace the entire green mill. Here's an example of the property records that show where the lots are. So the green area you can see on this map is where the green mill building is today. The blue area was also what used to be part of Green Mill Gardens, including all that outdoor space. Balaban and Katz bought up all that blue property, plus they bought up the property that you see in yellow. So that area, the yellow and blue parts of this map, form what became the Uptown Theatre. This is you can look at these fire insurance maps from a long time ago, which have these cool details of where buildings were. And this was from a map that was drawn as the building was being constructed. So to build the theater, they had to tear down the area that was Green Mill Gardens. This is a photo showing them clearing that area. You can see there used to be an outdoor stage there. This is a photo looking from Broadway, looking west, where they were building the main lobby of the theater. As time went on, you had these steel beams rising up to form the massive structure that would be the Uptown. And at one point, a group of electricians posed for a photo in the space that would become the Grand Auditorium. Now, even though back in the teens, everything seemed to be French, including the Riviera Theater and the Green Mill, now things were taking more of a Spanish trend. And it's sort of an interesting question of like, why is France the trendy thing in one decade and then suddenly Spain becomes the trendy thing? Designers were inspired by the look of the buildings at the 1915 Panama, California exposition in San Diego. But there was also just a certain Spanish buzz in American pop culture at the time. The Mark of Zorro was a huge hit movie in 1920. And moviegoers were going gaga over dark-skinned Latin lovers, people like Rudolph Valentino. He was Italian, but he played some Spanish characters. And the Mexican actor Roman Navarro. For whatever reason, people in the 1920s seemed to be fascinated by Spain and Spanish men. Another building that opened in the same neighborhood a year later is the Aragon Ballroom. This also has a Spanish theme, and if anything, it's really even more pronounced with this building. You can see here what the inside of it looked like. It's named after a region of Spain where the style of architecture blends Islamic ornamental traditions with Gothic and Hispanic elements. So these are some of the buildings that where you can see the look they were going for. This is the front of the Uptown Theatre. The blueprints are at the Chicago History Museum's Research Center. You can ask to see them. They'll bring them out, and it will sit on a table probably about 4 or 5 times as big as this podium that I'm standing in front of. These are pictures where I held my iPhone over it to snap a picture of the blueprints. And you can get a sense of the sort of castle-like look they were going for. Here's where the signature of the architects. And this will give you an idea of how gigantic this theater was, with a total of 4,320 seats. With that many seats, you would think, like, why would you build a movie theater that has 4,000 seats in it? Because if you open a theater today to show movies, I don't know that you would ever have 4,000 people turn out for a showing of a movie. But not only did you have 4,000 people seeing movies in that era, that was multiple times per day. So while you had a few thousand people watching a movie, you might have a few thousand people standing around waiting for the next show. So that's why the lobbies, and this is the blueprint showing the grand lobby room that we saw earlier, that's why these lobbies had to be so big. The theater had space for a few thousand people to stand around in the lobbies before they went into the show. This picture shows you a cross-section of the auditorium. Now, one of the things that Balaban and Katz and Rapp were known for, Rapp designed buildings that had really wide auditoriums. Even the seats in the back felt pretty close to the stage. But to convince people that the building was safe, and you had these these balconies that stretch really wide and don't have any columns holding them up because they use cantilevered steel. So Balaban and Katz loaded up the lobby of the building with cement bags just to demonstrate how sound and the structure was, make people feel safe when they were in the building. In August 1925, the anticipation was building. Newspaper ads announced the Uptown's grand opening using flowery language. The Theater of 1,001 Wonders opens soon. Magnificence beyond all your dreams. This ad used a phrase that was made famous by the German writer Goethe, who said that architecture was like frozen music. And apparently they were saying that that's what you would see if you came to the Uptown Theater. This ad says, "It will hush and thrill you. It throbs with beauty, lovely enough to hold the heart of a woman all her life. You will love it." To celebrate the grand opening, the Uptown Theater held a festival. Bands played in the streets. A daredevil acrobat set himself on fire and jumped off a building into a pool of water. And over the course of 6 days, a reported 750,000 people came to the festival. You can see here the crowds gathering on a hot day. The temperature was 85 degrees. The marquee says that it welcomes people to one of the great art buildings of the world with an acre of seats. Here's more of an aerial view of what it looked like. And you can see at this time, the Green Mill had changed its name to the Montmartre Cafe, and that's what the awning there says near the Uptown Theater. And by this point, the windmill is gone from the building of the roof. It's kind of a mystery what happened to it. So as the theater was opening, the Spanish theme was reflected in the entertainment. So for the grand opening, they had an Argentine band leader conducting an orchestra and ballet dancers in a piece that was titled Under Spanish Skies. They even extended this Spanish theme to their hiring practices. Now, Balaban and Katz did a lot of things that would not fly today. They wanted people of very specific types for each job. So when they were hiring directorettes, these women who would help theater patrons, they advertised for girls over 17 who were brunettes of the tall Spanish type. Wanted basically theater patrons to feel like they were walking into Spain, so this would help with that. As people walked into the theater, this is the same room that I showed you earlier, the picture that's on the cover of our book. This is a black and white photo from 1925 showing what the grand lobby looked like. It was a room 8 stories high with marble floors and gilded plaster columns featuring water-bearing maidens. And there's 3 huge bronze and crystal chandeliers hanging above it all. At the other end of the room, you would walk up these curving stairs, and if you looked back toward Broadway, you would see the daylight streaming through the large windows above the entrance. That's half a block away now. Along the edges of the lobby, you would walk through this mezzanine area alongside paintings, sculptures, and furniture fit for royalty. The other spaces where you could linger included this fountain with a marble statue. And I should note that Balaban and Katz told their ushers and employees to let people loiter. You know, if people want to hang out in the lobby and look at the sculptures and things like that, just let them stay. Don't rush them into the theater. There was a nursery with amusements for children. Mothers could drop off their kids to be tended by matrons while they enjoyed the entertainment. It's a fairly small space with a low ceiling, which helped the children maybe feel a little bit taller. Over in the northwest part of the building near Magnolia Avenue, there was another big lobby. This was called the Grand Foyer. And this is a different design scheme. It looks kind of more medieval, I think, with more faces. David Sifjek, the caretaker of the theater, has told me that even though he's been in the building thousands of times, every time he's in there, he sees some little detail which he may not have noticed before. And you can just see how detailed the place is. Once you step into the auditorium, this is what you would see looking toward the stage. Now, this was the biggest theater, and it still is in some ways the biggest theater in the city of Chicago. It's even larger than the auditoriums at the Auditorium Theater and the Chicago Theater. When it opened in 1925, it was the world's second largest movie theater. The only theater with more seats at that time was like the Capitol Theater in New York. Looking toward the stage and the screen, it looks like those stairs in front of you lead directly to the orchestra's conductor. If you were standing on the stage looking back the other direction, this is what you would see. There's 8 levels stretching up and up, including a balcony with 4 levels. The projection booth has 3 small square openings way up above there. And up above that, there's a golden dome with 3 tiers, all with recessed lighting. Now, while you were watching a movie or a performance on the stage, the lighting changed colors in all of these arches, cornices, and the layers of the dome. The lighting was designed to match the story. So while there was a nighttime scene on the movie screen, the lights in these parts of the auditorium would turn blue. Or if it was a love scene, they might use lavender. If it was a war scene, they might use red. If you were watching a scene in a forest, the room would turn green. In this view from the balcony, you can see the orchestra pit, which had an elevator that lifted it up 18 feet. So at the beginning of the evening, the musicians would seem to kind of emerge out of the subterranean. The conductor had a separate lift, and the organ and the organist were on the right side of the stage. This stage was 70 feet and 1 inch across. Balaban and Katz asked their architects to add that 1 inch so they could say it was wider than the 70-foot stage at the Chicago Theater, making this the widest. And within that proscenium, that fancy grill you see there, the doors would open up and the movie screen is behind that. Movie screen was actually not as big as you might think it would be given how big the theater is. At nighttime, the building was lit up with thousands of light bulbs. People could see it from miles away. Now, at this time, the neighborhood was really just getting to be known as Uptown. People called it other things, including the Wilson Avenue District, Little Paris, like I mentioned earlier. But surely, I think this movie theater solidified the idea that this is the Uptown neighborhood. How could you call it anything else if you saw these giant signs there? So in the years just after this, the local business association took out this series of ads in the newspapers about the city called Uptown Chicago. They urged people to shop in Uptown and dance. They said you should spend the 4th of July in Uptown and visit Uptown's beaches. This ad called the neighborhood Chicago's summer blessing. And as this ad said, nothing is lacking in Uptown Chicago. They were basically hyping it as a miniature downtown that was similar to the Loop, but away from downtown. But for some people, Uptown had sort of an unsavory reputation. This local newspaper reported on a morals probe of Wilson Avenue, and one of the headlines is called Sheridan Road, a pickup paradise. What was going on here? Essentially, the neighborhood had a lot of young people living in it. I've looked at the census records, and this neighborhood had a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, including single women living in apartments. You had some married couples that did not have children, and rather than staying home and raising a family, they preferred to go out at night and see concerts and dance and have dinner and see a movie. And this was really a new sort of neighborhood that people had never seen before. And some conservative folks did not look kindly on this, but a lot of people simply liked going to Uptown to have fun. Now, when they saw a show at the Uptown Theater, it was not just a movie. Balaban and Katz had a philosophy called continuous entertainment, where they would have the movie plus an orchestra playing. During the silent movies, the orchestra and an organist would play, but the orchestra would also play some separate music. You would have song and dance routines. It was basically sort of a variety show. So some of the famous performers who appeared at the Uptown include Tom Mix, The cowboy star, the ad said, "See him ride, rope, shoot. Tom Mix and his wonder horse, Tony, on the stage." You had Blackstone, the world's most baffling magician in person. "He will astound you. His feats are strange, mysterious, unaccountable. See him drill through a man." The Marx Brothers, the four Marx Brothers performed at the Uptown Theatre for a week. They had just had their hit on Broadway, The Coconuts. They had not yet made it into a movie, so the audiences here basically got a preview of what they were going to be like on the movie screen. And reportedly, Groucho made some ad-lib jokes about Chicago's crime, which the audience cracked up about. Duke Ellington and his New York Cotton Club Orchestra played at the Uptown, and they were billed as the hottest band in the world, which is not too much of an exaggeration. But the movie business was going through some changes. So just a couple of years after the Uptown Theatre opened, audiences saw this for the first time.
Blue sky, smiling at me, nothing but blue sky do I see. Oh, oh.
That, of course, is Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer. And this was the first first major motion picture where people could hear someone on the screen singing, talking, and it brought this huge demand for sound movies. It did not show at the Uptown because the Uptown did not even have a sound system. Here's the ad for when it opened at the Garrick Theater downtown. So over the next several months after that, the Uptown and other theaters rushed to wire the theaters for sound systems so that they could run sound from the projection booth to speakers. And so it was in September 1928 that for the first time, theater goers at the Uptown had a sound movie, but this movie did not have any audible dialogue in it. It was called Warming Up. It was a baseball movie, and it had all sorts of baseball sound effects, including the crowds cheering. And according to the advertisement, people in the theater were cheering along with the crowds on the screen. Later that month, we finally got a movie with the sound of people speaking on the screen. Myrna Loy in State Street Sadie, which the ad describes as the exciting story of a girl everybody called a wonton. And it said, "Hear their voices in the thrilling scenes of this nightlife adventure. Our perfected Vitaphone makes it real as life." So even though this change to sound movies meant that it no longer made sense for the orchestra and organist to be playing during the movies, so that ended. For a while, the Uptown continued presenting live entertainment along with the movies, but the Great Depression hit in 1929, and by the winter of 1932 to 33, ticket sales were dropping because it was just something people couldn't afford. Millions of people were out of work. Balaban and Katz took out this ad, and you can see that this ad features several of their theaters, Chicago, Oriental, Tivoli, Uptown. And they said, "Millions find happiness in Balaban and Katz theaters. You too need the romance, the excitement, the relaxation that Balaban and Katz theaters provide, as surely as you need food and lodging." Of course, not everyone could afford it, so they cut ticket prices and, they cut ticket prices, and they also decided that live entertainment was just something they couldn't afford to present anymore. So here at on January 1st, 1933, for the first time, they advertised that there's a big program of complete motion picture entertainment, along with the feature film, Flesh. I don't know what that was about. They had a few short films, a song sung by Bing Crosby, a Disney cartoon, a travelogue of Russia, but no live entertainment anymore, and they also were advertising their reduced prices. The other thing that changed here was that Balaban and Katz and other companies decided that it was no longer it no longer made any sense for them to build these giant movie palaces that were very expensive. So this was the last one that opened in Chicago. The Southtown, which Balaban and Kits opened on Christmas Day 1931 in the Inglewood neighborhood. No one would build anything like this again. But, of course, as we all know, the movie business did sort of bounce back and the economy bounced back. And this is a photo from the 1940s where you can see the Uptown Theatre in the background and the Riv in the foreground. In 1946, movie ticket sales hit an all-time peak. Americans bought an average of 32 tickets per year. That compares today with an average of 2 tickets per year. So averaging it up, Americans were going to the movies 16 times more often then than they do today. But over the next decade, those numbers plummeted. One reason is TVs. People started getting televisions in their home. That gave them less incentive to go out and watch a movie at night. So to compete with that, the Uptown Theatre did a couple of things. One thing they did was install a giant 70-foot wide screen for CinemaScope movies. This is an ad for the first CinemaScope movie they showed in 1954, Beneath the 12-Mile Reef. The Uptown also installed closed-circuit TV equipment where they could broadcast, show on the screen live events like boxing matches and operas, special events that were not being shown on TVs at home. One example here, the boxing match for the heavyweight title between Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay, who soon changed his name to Muhammad Ali. And you can see from this ad that it was all sold out in advance. So people had bought tickets to fill those 4,300 seats. They wanted to be there at the theater watching this. I can also imagine it must have been pretty dramatic being there with all the people around you as you're watching the boxing match. Meanwhile, the neighborhood of Uptown was changing. It was no longer the glamorous nightlife spot that it had been in the 1920s. Rents were cheap, and the neighborhood attracted a lot of migrants, especially poor white people from Appalachia. So we started getting some headlines like these from the Tribune and Harper's Magazine. Tribune, girl reporter roams through hillbilly jungles of Chicago, finds feuding breed of migrants. Hillbillies invade Chicago. New breed of migrants are a city problem. Hillbillies bring odd customs. All roads lead to the north for hill folk of Appalachia. There is money to be had and whiskey too. But the people, of course, who lived in the neighborhood didn't take very kindly to this sort of coverage. And they pointed out that, for example, they weren't really to blame for their landlords letting their buildings fall into disrepair. While all this was going on, of course, the neighborhood still continued to attract people going to the movies, but the movie palaces like the Uptown Theatre were no longer seemed to make economic sense, and even architecturally, people were building less ornate buildings now. So some of the other movie palaces began to be torn down. The Garrick Theater in downtown Chicago, the theater where the jazz singer played, it's not technically, you might argue that it's not a movie palace because it was built earlier, but it was designed by Louis Sullivan and Dankmar Adler. So when it was torn down, it prompted protests. And the Uptown itself continued to survive, but you started to wonder, how long is this building going to last? In 1968, a reporter for the Chicago Tribune visited the theater and wrote about how the building was starting to look a little dingy. Dust now covers peeling gold wallpaper in the quiet balconies, and bits of cracked plaster have fallen on the once colorful tapestry rugs. And the manager complained it was just simply too expensive to keep such a huge building clean. So in 1969 and 1970, the owners auctioned off a lot of the fancy stuff from the theater and other 7 other movie palaces, things like the furniture, some of the paintings hanging on the wall. These all went up for auction at an auction house on North Broadway, and the Chicago Daily News ran this headline about an age of splendor on the auction block. So you might have thought that this theater sounds like it's on its last legs. However, starting around 1975, it had a new heyday a new company called Jam Productions that was promoting concerts began holding rock concerts in the Uptown Theater while it continued showing movies on other nights. This started on Halloween night 1975 with The Tubes, and this headline from the Daily News described how they broke the bizarre barrier with their concert. Over the next 6 years, the Uptown had concerts by many of the biggest pop stars and rock stars of the era. Bruce Springsteen played there a few times. He played at the Uptown Theater when he was playing even bigger venues in other cities, and he said that he wanted to play at the Uptown because I like the intimacy of the place. This is a photo Paul Natkin took, which is from our book. Paul Natkin also took these photos when Prince played his first Chicago concerts at the Uptown. His first show was opening for Rick James. Everyone seemed to say he stole the show, so when he came back, he was the headliner. The Grateful Dead played at the Uptown more than anyone else, 17 times. Now, I found this audio of Jerry Garcia talking about why he loved playing at the Uptown Theater, and he compared it to the Auditorium Theater. I'm going to play this audio. It's a little scratchy and hard to hear because it was recorded in a hotel room, 1981, but I have the text on the screen for you to follow along, so hopefully you can make it all out.
It's a nice little theater, and it's nice that it's loose enough and relaxed enough so that, you know, people can go in there and have a good time. We used to play at this place there in Chicago called the Auditorium, but it was one of those places where you couldn't touch anything, and the audience would always get in trouble because the seat would get wrecked or something, you know, so it was like really uptight, and we never sounded good in the place either. I mean, we played there for years, and we could never seem to get a good performance out in Chicago. It was the weirdest thing, and we played it for a long time, and until we started playing the Uptown. The Uptown like opened up for us. It was that right combination of being basically a good theater, but funky enough that, you know, nobody was worried about it. It's like important that it's relaxed a little bit. It's a drag when the audience gets tyrannized, you know, but it completely wrecks the whole point of it.
Now, despite the fact that Jerry Garcia seemed to think no one needed to worry about the Uptown, there was reason for concern. The owners at that time couldn't afford to put the sort of upkeep into the building that it needed. So December 19th, 1981, the Jay Giles Band played at the Uptown Theater. This is a photo Paul Natkin took. They had just had their hit Centerfold. The night of this concert, the heating was struggling to stay on in the building. The bathrooms were in bad shape. You can see in this photo, Paul handed his camera to the lead singer, Peter Wolf, who took a picture of the crowd. There's one guy there in the crowd wearing his winter coat. He's probably cold. So after this concert, the theater shut down. A few months later, the Chicago Tribune ran this headline describing it as a grimy jewel waiting silently. It wasn't clear at this time, is the building going to reopen sometime soon, or is it going to be closed for a while? The guy you see on the right there was a longtime projectionist, Phil Bowman, who was volunteering to keep the building in good shape. But the owners at that time, Plitt Theaters, really didn't care about the theater, and during a cold winter in the early 1980s, the pipes that drain water from the roof burst, causing a lot of damage to the plaster and the walls in the building. The building went through a series of owners over the next 2 decades, and in 2008, Jerry Michelson, who also owns Jam Productions, bought the building with plans to reopen it. It finally seemed to be happening in 2018 when Mayor Rahm Emanuel announced a plan to reopen it for $75 million. But then a few things happened. They did end up lining all the investors they needed, and the COVID pandemic really made it hard to get anything done. Our book has some photos that were taken over the last recent years showing what the building looks like inside right now. You can see here a sign where it says the balcony is closed. This is a view of the mezzanine where you can get both an idea of the nice design of the building, but you can also see that, oh yeah, that place needs some work, including new seats. This is one of the corners of the dome, an area that's largely intact. And if you could get a close-up look of some of the designs there, the entire dome is surrounded by heraldry and designs like these laughing king's heads. If you're in the balcony looking down toward the stage, you see this. There's the steel fire curtain is closed over the stage right now. It largely looks like that picture from 1925, although obviously it needs some refurbishing and repairs. And this is a view where you can see the orchestra pit from an angle there. This past summer, Jerry Michelson, as our book came out, at the same time Jerry Michelson started talking about his plans to revive the theater. He now says it will take $190 million to refurbish this theater. He doesn't have that kind of money to do it, but he's trying to find investors who do, and he's urging the city to increase the amount of TIF funding it's going to put into the project. I was there when Mayor Brandon Johnson and some other local officials took a brief tour of the building. That's Jerry Michelson standing next to him. When the mayor walked into the building, his first words when he looked at the inside of the building were, "Oh my goodness." A lot of people react that way. Here they are on the stage talking about plans, and at the end of this tour, Mayor Johnson said that, yes, this revitalization needs to happen, and I heard him use that word needs. But it remains to be seen, given all the problems the city has with funding anything, how much money they will put into this project. In the year 2000, my co-author, Andy Pierce, helped to organize an event where they tried to recreate this photo from 1925. They gathered a group of people in front of the theater to pose for a photo. These were people who were fans of the old theater or hoped to see it reopen, people from the neighborhood. They did it again in 2005, and at this time you could see there was scaffolding on the building. Some parts of the exterior were removed to protect them for later use. Then 20 years passed by, but we did it again in this past August as the theater turned 100 years old. Several hundred people gathered in front of the theater again. These people hope the Uptown will reopen someday. They hope they'll get a chance to step inside and see a show. It'll take a lot of work and a lot of money, but I do have hope it could happen. As the banner on that marquee says, the Uptown Theater was built not for today, but for all time. And that's my talk.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was fascinating. We will now have a musical interlude, followed by our Q&A. We will have a basket going around, correct? Where you can make contributions, or you can make contributions, oh, it's not on there. There are also digital ways that you can make contributions. It's really important that our generosity, it shows how meaningful that these programs are for us. So we suggest a donation of $5, but any amount is great. And we just are really appreciative of all the members who keep it running. All right. Is there music? it is now time for our Q&A. We have the mic over here where you can line up. Please keep your questions brief so that we can have lots of them and learn more. And yeah, I'm excited to hear what people have to say.
Questions?
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the other movie palaces you mentioned from the same era, the Chicago Theater, except for example, the Aragon, they're still up and running. So what's the difference?
Well, some of these theaters, like the Chicago Theater, for example, there was actually talk of demolishing that theater around the 1980s. It was during the reign, reign's probably not the right word, the term of Mayor Harold Washington that they made efforts to save that theater and refurbish it. Another one, the Oriental Theater, which is now known as the Nederlander, that was closed for like 15 years and had to be refurbished and reopened. The Aragon's a little different because it was a ballroom, not a theater. But, you know, the Aragon also went through a period where it closed for a little while in the 60s, reopened for a while. They called it the Cheetah Lounge. And then they decided to go back to calling it the Aragon. From what I read, they decided, oh, this fancy decor looks out of date, so let's cover it up with sheets and things like that. One difference is that the Uptown, I think the Uptown would be easier to reopen if we hadn't had that little disaster with the pipes bursting in the early 1980s. So it's really unfortunate that the people who owned the building at that time didn't care enough to keep it heated. It's not an insurmountable problem. The structure of the building is still sound, but it does add this whole other layer of what needs to be done. So I think that kind of created an obstacle to the building reopening.
Those were the days. Thanks for bringing them back to us. Could you tell us some more about Balaban and Katz? Do they continue to survive as a company? Did they go bankrupt? What happened to them?
Well, they eventually got, it's sort of a confusing tangle of business transactions over the years. One thing that happened, like just when the Uptown Theater opened, Balaban and Katz was becoming sort of a little empire of theaters in Chicago, but they still had trouble getting the movies they wanted to show because they didn't have a lot of clout in Hollywood. But just a few months later, they basically merged with Paramount. And the two companies became kind of like an intertwined business empire. And Sam Katz, who was one of the Balaban and Katz bigwigs, moved to New York and became one of the most powerful men in the movie business because he was opening movie palaces around the country and he was dictating what the entertainment shows would be like in each theater. Then when the Depression hit, he was moved over to become a producer in Hollywood, and like half a year later got fired as the company was facing bankruptcy. Barney Balaban, who was another one of the bigwigs who opened the Uptown Theater, ended up becoming the chairman of Paramount for many years. So they were really involved in the business for decades, but eventually, like by the 1960s, the Uptown Theater and other Balaban and Katz theaters got bought by ABC, the TV company. And then eventually that got sold off to Plitt Theaters. And so there is no real Balaban and Katz company anymore. It got swallowed up over the years. But I do have to say, I mean, like my book talks a lot about the different things involving Balaban and Katz, but I couldn't get into all of it. And I do feel like they were one of the major companies in the 20th century that really shaped the kind of entertainment that America experienced.
Thank you.
Thank you for just a beautiful presentation that weaved, history into the story of this building. I'm wondering how hopeful we can be about this theater ever being restored, given how I think, one of the lasting legacies of COVID has been, kind of the decline in people gathering in third spaces, there's a glut
Yeah.
of movie theaters now. Any
I do have some
thoughts?
hope. I mean, I think the pandemic really hit the concert business hard, but it has bounced back. In some cases, unfortunately, I mean, I like seeing concerts with cheaper tickets, and if you follow the news today at all, you'll see like just the exorbitant prices that people are paying for something like a Taylor Swift concert. It just blows my mind that anyone could even afford it, let alone decide to spend their money on that. I do think, while I would hope that the Uptown reopens and doesn't always have super expensive concert tickets, I do think that obviously that shows that there is some demand. I still think people like to be at a live event. So I think it could work, but it's just a big obstacle to raise the money and to do the work to reopen it.
Hi, thank you very much
Yeah.
for a really interesting
welcome.
talk. One of the things that was interesting to me was that it seems like Balaban and Katz were building on a scale that hadn't been done before, like the thousands of, a space for thousands of people just between shows. Did they have an impact on like architecture and design? Did they leave behind any like innovations in terms of building huge structures? And also, a little bit on the grim side, were there any accidents when they were trying to build new stunning things like it looked at one point like they had a huge steel platform
Yeah.
without beams, without support. How did they pull that off, and was that an advancement that other people used after that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not really aware of any accidents that happened during the construction, although things like that did happen. So, I wouldn't be shocked to find out about it. I think in terms of the style, people like me still appreciate how ornate these buildings look and how beautiful they look, but it did fall out of fashion. So you've got the Chicago is known for Mies van der Rohe and the less is more look. So, and I think, even nationwide, the trend was toward, build more streamlined buildings. We're not going to spend money putting on, like statues of water-bearing maidens on the column and that sort of thing. So it's beautiful to see that, but it's not something that, I mean, even if you decided today that you wanted to build something like this, I don't know if you could find the craftsmen to do that at the cost you would have to spend. It was pretty innovative in terms of how they did the crowd movement. You had crowds coming in off of Broadway, but when people were leaving, they left out the other sides of the building. So I think that L shape really helped with traffic flow. You didn't have people leaving a show, crossing over with the people coming in. And I would hope that that's a good example of how you make sure that people can get out of a building in case of an emergency. One thing, the architects were surely thinking about the Iroquois Theater fire disaster from 1903, which was a theater in Chicago that had a fire and 600 people died. It's still, I think, the worst death toll for a single building fire in the history of the United States. And the reason those people died was not so much that the flames and smoke got to them, but that they couldn't get out of the building, and there were crushes of people trying to get out. So 20 years later, when they're designing this building, they don't specifically mention the Iroquois Theater fire, but they're thinking like, okay, how do we design a building where that is not going to happen? And make sure that there's plenty of exits and there's lots of space in the lobbies, so as the crowd's leaving, you wouldn't feel jam-packed as you're getting out of the building. So I think that is a legacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for today's presentation. I arrived in Chicago to come to school here in fall of 1981.
Yeah. Just before the theater closed.
Yeah, I never got there.
Yeah.
I've been to countless concerts at the Riv, obviously the Green Mill and the Aragon. But I do have a friend who did go see some rock concerts, including that Jay Giles band
Oh,
show.
yeah.
He remembers it. And
Did he say it was cold?
well, I did.
Maybe he
well, it
wasn't
was
paying attention.
December of '81, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd only been in Chicago for a couple months. But I was wondering, does Jam have like a listing of all the rock concerts that they sponsored at the
At the Uptown?
Uptown?
There
Or-
are a few
or
lists-
anybody else.
There are a few lists out there, and my book does not have a list in it. However, I do have a list, which I've been thinking like, oh, I should put this online somewhere. We could do that, I suppose.
I missed the first couple of minutes of your talk, so apologies if you already answered this question. But it seems to me that the financial aspect and the amount of competition for other beautiful movie palaces in Chicago makes reopening it as a 4,200-foot or seat theater doesn't make sense economically, in my humble opinion. So I'm wondering if anybody has proposed a creative reuse like a hotel or condos where somebody could build on top, 20 stories, and then redevelop the first as
People have talked about that kind of thing.
retail and whatnot.
The current owner, and I agree with him, like wants to see it preserved as a theater. However, and there's also the city council gave this building a landmark status. And there's some gray area about exactly how that will be interpreted, but basically it means you can't tear it down and you're not supposed to radically alter it. So I think like changing it into condos or something like that would probably be considered something that violates the landmark status.
So
But
you
they do
can't
want
build
a
on
lot-
top. You can't build on top. You can't leave the first,
That's a good question. I don't think so.
like if there's enough of a
They could
setback
pro-
so
like,
it
there's
doesn't.
probably some things that you could add to the building. I mean,
Yeah.
but I think there's a limit on how much you could do. One of the plans was to have something like an IMAX screen that would like move up and down, and so they'd have to build some structure on top of the building for that. But that plan never got.
I mean, I can see it as retail, offices, condos, and then a hotel
Well, one
or.
thing that I've suggested, and I think most people agree with, is that if it reopened and you had concerts there, it would be great to use the other spaces in the building, like the
Right.
lobby, for special events, maybe a smaller concert, maybe a dance party, maybe an art opening. I mean, there's all kinds of things
Right.
you could do in there.
Art
that would
galleries.
Beyond just, the big
Yeah.
concert. Like, what else can you do with this space?
I mean, are they allowed to subdivide that large auditorium into 2 or 3 smaller spaces?
I don't know if they're allowed to. That's a good question. The owner doesn't want to.
Well, if it's
But
that or
they
tear
would-
down the
they-
whole.
they
lot,
would-
they
his
can't.
plan would, it's probable that the seats in the main floor or some part of the main floor would be taken out, so you'd have people standing near the stage or something like that, and then they could have seats for some shows and standing room only for other shows.
Like the Ramova.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I wanted to ask a question about maybe another theater too, like the Congress and the Portage Park Theater. But before that, to feed off that last question, do you know if the current owners have to pay property taxes?
Yeah. Jerry Michelson has told me that he basically spends about $500,000 a year on this building in property taxes and upkeep. So, it's not,
It's a lot.
it's a lot. I mean, it's not something I can afford.
And so the
He
building.
may not have the money to reopen the place, but he is putting money into just making sure that it stays.
Could you speculate on why? Why would you spend $500,000? It's been vacant for 45 years.
45 years. Or well,
And you-
44.
Why would you spend $500,000? Why not just abandon it?
He,
It's chump change for you, I suppose.
Mr. Michelson says he wants to preserve this building and reopen it. There have been previous owners where you wondered. There was one owner of the building, Lou Wolf, and every time he was mentioned in the newspapers described him as a slumlord And he had been convicted of arson at one point, trying to burn down a building. And he went to prison a couple of times.
Yeah.
So when Lou Wolf owned the building, it was sort of like, what is this guy doing? Is he just, he's sitting on this property trying to get money out of it somehow. I don't think Jerry Michelson is like that. I do think he honestly wants to bring this building back. But it is something where if you found a billionaire who decided, yeah, I'm going to spend $100 million to reopen this, that person's not going to be getting back big profits from it. It
Right.
sort of becomes more of a philanthropic effort to save the building, to reopen it, to get use for it. It might make sense to make it some sort of nonprofit or government-run thing where it's not really driven by the profit motive, but it's being preserved.
Yeah, I'm just to follow up a little bit. So the cost to do this, you said, is like 190 million?
That is Mr. Michelson's
Estimate?
Estimate.
It
was in 2018 when Mayor Emanuel announced the plan. It was 75 million.
Yeah.
So I was a little shocked to see that it went all the way up to 190 million. But they point to some examples of other projects around the country that are comparable. And this is such a big building. Part of the question is, I've said, well, you don't really need to make every single thing in the building look nice and shiny like it did in 1925. You can kind of get like halfway there and reopen it. But Mr. Michelson says, really, you can't do a half-assed job of it. You've got to like make it look really nice. So I do wonder, like, maybe it's possible to do it for 150 million, 170. Like, I'm not an expert enough to really say if that 190 million figure is what it absolutely has to be, but it's definitely going to be expensive.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and that's why I wanted to ask about these other theaters, particularly the Congress, which I pass often. You're familiar with it on Milwaukee,
yeah.
And Portage is also on Milwaukee, but a little bit further north.
Yeah.
And these, and particularly the Congress, it doesn't get done. I'm wondering if have looked into this too, and it's constantly like they're waiting for the government to give them tens of millions of dollars, which probably will never come. And that's how this feels too to me.
I haven't studied those in detail. I saw concerts at both of those places, and I saw a movie at the Portage. I would love to see them reopen too. Again, they've had some issues where, I don't know that the owners are to blame, but there were questions like, is the owner the person who can pull this project together? And to some extent, yes, it has to do with how much government financing you can get. I think the city has committed to some financing for those projects, but,
Right.
Again, like with the Uptown, when the Mayor Emanuel announced this plan, I think his announcement was a little premature because they had a lot of the financing lined up, but not all of it. And so that final chunk of like, we need to find someone else who can put up, I think it was $30 million, just didn't happen. And then a couple of years later, COVID hit. So, I think he was being optimistic when he said it was going to be reopening.
You spoke to the limits of the land created by the landmark status.
Yeah.
Is that the big barrier? If they, I don't think it's going to go away.
Well, right now, the owner doesn't plan to change the building radically. Now, they do want some modernizations. It doesn't have an elevator for audience members.
Right.
It doesn't have modern bathrooms in it, so there's a lot of things like that where, yes, it does need to be modernized somewhat, but you don't want to totally ruin the 1925 architecture of the building at the same time.
Thank you.
Ford spent $1 billion restoring the central train station in Detroit
Yeah.
recently. How much? $1 billion. Restored it to its original condition.
Yeah. I do have copies of my book, which are $50. I know that's a little steep of a price. I have a table set up out there by the entrance. So if anyone's interested in buying a copy, come see me. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I enjoyed it.
I did want to say that it is so amazing, no matter what happens to the actual building in the future, it's great that you wrote this book that preserves its memory so that we have it. That's beautiful. All right. So we do have some announcements. They should be up on the screen. Awesome. So there are a few more spots open at our members' community dinners this spring. This is a series of small group dinners open to all EHS members. We hope you'll join in one of these fun evenings of food and conversation and getting to know your fellow members. Contact Ben Ost for more info on the dates and the locations and how to sign up. Our next virtual community chat will be on Wednesday, January 28th at 7 p.m. We share friendship, issues of the day, and fun in a caring Zoom chat. Join us to connect and enjoy each other's company. You can find the link in today's bulletin or on the activities page of our website. We also have a new humanist inquiry discussion group to explore the philosophical, intellectual, and cultural foundations of humanism. We'll explore readings, lectures, and presentations and share our reflections on the human experience through a humanist lens. Led by Charlie Sachs, we'll meet on the first Sunday of each month in the upstairs boardroom at 9:15 a.m. We also invite participants to engage through our email group. Contact Charlie or the EHS office to be added to the list. Newcomers are welcome. Next Sunday, February 1st, our Community Day program will feature another in our Lightning Talk series. A few members of our community will share short prepared talks on the theme Lost Places, related to today's. If you are interested in contributing, reach out to Ray Berg to provide information on your talk idea. Lots of announcements. Our next game night will be Friday, February 6th from 6 to 9 p.m. All are welcome to join us for a relaxed evening of board games and singing. We'll have some games here, but feel free to bring your favorites. If you can, bring a snack or drinks to share. And just a note, kids do come, and it's fun with kids too. Okay. On Sunday, February 8th, join acclaimed New Yorker cartoonist and author Ken Crimstein for a powerful talk on his graphic nonfiction book, When I Grow Up, The Lost Autobiographies of 6 Yiddish Teenagers. Crimstein will share the extraordinary story of autobiographies written by Jewish youths in 1930s Yiddishwania, which was Lithuania, for a YIVO Institute contest. Crimstein will reveal how he transformed 6 of these long-forgotten voices into poignant narratives that capture both the aspirations of their young authors and the tragic loss of Yiddishwania's culture in the Holocaust. In addition, Crimstein will address the history of storytelling through cartoons, why he chose to go in that direction as an artist, and the increasing popularity of graphic novels. For more details on upcoming Sunday morning programs and other activities, see our website at ethicalhumansociety.org, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for videos of past speakers and future streaming programs. Okay, I think that was the last one. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for coming, and let's say I don't want to forget anything. Yeah, thank you so much for coming, and we'll hope to see you in the front for a coffee and to chat. So, thank you.
You know, I thought about it.